So what do you think's going to happen to Santos here? Because it's one of those strange things. I understand how politics is, and I understand how, like, just the two-party system is a mess, and I talk about it all the time. And I know we're not going to get into politics and all that, but
the right and the left are both getting so much further and further away from each other.
And the Republicans on their end, they're what I think sometimes people don't realize is these people in Congress, all they are is a vote. And it's like, they're going to vote with us, so we need a guy in that seat who's going to vote with us to get some bills over the top, to pass some things that we want. And if we have a Democrat in that seat, it's going to screw up everything for us. I'm sure if it wasn't such a polarized two-party system and they were just using their ethics, they would go, we got to get this guy out of here. This doesn't look good. But
I think if they had more than a 4-seat majority, if they had 15 or 20-seat majority, it would be a totally different story too.
So I wonder if they're like plotting the perfect time to get this guy out, because more and more stuff is compounding. And like, the weird thing is like, what he did to you, there's some type of criminal motive for, of I'm going to get cash. But so many of the other stuff he did is the type of guy who's just a compulsive liar who lies about stuff that has no bearing on anything and isn't going to help him in any way. Like when he says, I produced Spider-Man on Broadway, like, it's not going to help your political career.
The biggest Broadway flop ever, by the way.
That's true. I remember, because there were all those injuries. I remember, like in the
Actors
theater,
were falling out of the air and landing in the audience and hurting.
Yeah,
people.
I remember that. That was a weird time, man. So it was weird that he even mentioned that. But yeah, I wonder what's going to happen to this guy. Like, is this the type of thing where he eventually winds up in jail? It's kind of odd. I wasn't going to bring this up, but it's odd that I'm wearing a New York Islanders hat, because I don't know if you remember. Are you a hockey guy at all?
I'm like my Devils.
So, okay. Well, I figure you're from New Jersey. But do you ever see that 30 for 30 on John Spano, the owner of the Islanders?
No.
So he was George Santos before there was George Santos. He owned the Islanders for a short period of time, and he claimed to be this like millionaire, had all this money, and it turned out it was all a lie. He wasn't worth nearly that, and he had to write checks to the NHL, and like he'd have to write a check for $300,000, and he'd write a check for $3,000, and they'd be like, it's missing a few zeros here, and he'd be like, I don't know what went wrong, and he'd be buying time until all these lies compounded. And he eventually wound up in jail. And this guy was a career criminal, because once he got out of jail for that, he worked for another company, was stealing money from that company, went to jail. And I know he's currently in jail. Yeah, so I'm wondering like how this Santos story ends. Is it going to end with him in jail for something he did? Because more and more stories are coming out. I figured we'd heard all of them, but like by the day, there's more things coming out. Like, is it gonna end with him no longer in Congress?
It has to.
Yeah,
it has to.
Well, what does he do then? Does he kind of wind up in the scenario you were in, where he's out on the streets? Like, what happens to this guy?
He's going to be, behind four walls, I think, at one point in time. He either needs to be in jail or in a mental hospital. Yeah, because there's obviously not something right with him. But above all, he needs to sit in a room for a while, a couple of years, and think about what he did.
And he doesn't, the lack of remorse, and also the lack of any shame. Like, I've even seen on his Twitter that how John Lovitz did the impression of him on SNL. And anyone else would be like, let me just not talk about this. Most people wouldn't have done what Santos did. But he's tweeting John Lovitz saying, like, that was a horrible impression of me. And I think he still thinks he's like a celebrity to some extent, and he is, because we're talking about him. But like, this isn't what you should want to be known for.
No, you're infamous, and not famous.
Exactly, and I think in his mind, he proved that you could fake your way to the top. And I'm wondering if the thing that's going to fuck him is going to be how his campaign funding, because that seems to be the big thing. He had to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars.
$700,000.
Yeah, to campaign, and we don't know where that money is.
Russian oligarch.
And that's another thing that he's laughed off. Like, he's gone on, I think, with Matt Gaetz, and he said, like, well, I know I'm not getting it from, like, Ukraine and China, like Joe Biden, or, but, like, we haven't heard where that money came from or why he got that money. Yeah, it makes you wonder too. Like, we had this guy, Coriolanus, on the podcast before. He goes by a call sign because he's done hacking for the U.S. government. He's a guy I know who's actually a Navy veteran as well. But he's spoken about how, like, the reason China or Russia will sometimes fund candidates is not necessarily because they love those candidates. It's they want to create a distrust in the system.
They want to disrupt the system.
Yeah, and maybe they would have funded a guy like this to prove like, hey, your democracy, the way you run things over there, exactly. Yeah, you don't vet anyone. And it's like, man, I've had like maybe one time in my life of doing radio where I've been duped by a fake CIA guy. I've talked about it before, this guy, Wayne Simmons. But and the reason I was because he had like quotes on his book from major people that we see on TV, generals, and he seems completely legit. But I do my due diligence when I have people on. Chris, is not here. Like, he does his due diligence when we have people on. I don't know how you get to that level, that you dupe the Republican Party, get into Congress, and now you are a congressman. It's mind-blowing to me, especially the stuff that he didn't go to the college he said he did, that he didn't work at all the places he did, because
Goldman Sachs and Citibank.
But like, to me, that could have been resolved in a day. If you gave me that resume and I own a corporation or something,
I'm making some phone calls,
and you wanted to work for me, yeah, I would have called. Did this person ever work here? What did they do here? Did this person graduate that college? I mean, I'm pretty sure if I gave someone my resume and I say I went to Hofstra University, I worked for SiriusXM, it would be pretty easy to verify all that. I don't understand this whole thing. It's mind-blowing to me.
If you were working somewhere else and they turned up a couple of weeks later that your whole entire resume was BS, you're on the road. Screw you, get out of here, liar.
Absolutely. And like, we're not making as much money as Congress people are.
He's making almost $200,000 a year.
Yeah.
Now he's not even on committee assignment, so he's doing nothing. He's earning a free paycheck, sitting on his laurels, doing not a damn thing.
And, in my opinion, what many of them are doing, Republican and Democrat, and we hear about it all the time, is like, they're in the inside of what's going on with businesses, and almost all of them are doing insider trading. That's not really insider trading because it's legally not insider trading. And he's the type of guy who's probably going to get in on that and make a ton of money. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, no one in Congress is going to want to like co-sponsor a bill with this guy. They're not going to want his name attached to anything.
Marjorie Taylor Greene just did yesterday.
They did? I didn't even know about that. Get into it then. I didn't know about it.
I don't even remember what it was. I was reading it on the way here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of her by any stretch, but it's like, even her, I would think, who has like, I would think her resume is at least what it says it is, Why would you want to align yourself with someone who we know their whole identity is a lie?
Tying an albatross around your neck. He's a big, fat, bespectacled albatross.
Do you think we're going to see a congressional hearing and like you're going to be out there and maybe like get a chance to get your due, and like what do you say? Like, I asked you before, like, what do we ultimately see happen?
Well, I was first contacted like the day after my story broke, after Jacqueline Sweet's story broke in the news. The very next day, the New York State Attorney General had contacted me, and I gave them my whole story, and then it moved up from there. Now I'm talking to the last week I spoke to the FBI about it, so they're working on it. And it's all rolling up into the whole big ball of everything that he's done so far. I mean, he treated me so badly back there 6 years ago. It dehumanized me. It made me feel like a piece of garbage. And just talking to law enforcement about it has really made me feel a hell of a lot better. It makes me feel validated. Like, you're not a piece of garbage, Rich. You have a right to be upset about this, and, we're going to help you.
Does it seem like, when you say you spoke to law enforcement, does it seem like they're stacking things up and piling like a case against this guy?
They told me that they would call me back if they needed any more information. They needed to straighten some stuff out. Text messages and stuff that I sent them came in out of order.
Okay.
But they said they got their hands so full right now that it might take them a few weeks to get back to me.
Yeah. It's personal.
I don't know if they meant they had their hands full with him, but they just said they had their hands full.
It's personal to me too, because I've said it on the show. Like, this is my congressman. And I think being from like New Jersey and being from Long Island and at least following politics on some extent my whole life and probably your whole voting life, like, there's always that clown in Congress from some other state, like you mentioned a Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you're like, who are these fucking idiots who voted for this person? And it's a weird thing when like the number one most embarrassing person in Congress is your district, and like, my district, like, it's an affluent area. It's like a very more
Oyster
people,
Bay and stuff up there, right?
Yeah, more people. I'd have to check that. I know, but it's
mansions everywhere. People got
Washington,
6-7 acres.
Yeah, and I mean, more people. You mentioned 9/11. More people from my town died in 9/11 than I believe any other town, at least in New York, because it's all these people who work in Wall Street who commute from Manhasset, Port Washington, Great Neck into the city, the hedge fund people like that my parents knew, like Chris Quackenbush, who I knew. And yeah, it's pretty crazy that we voted this guy in. And I think as a whole, like, this district is really embarrassed. And I know that overwhelmingly people are saying this guy needs to be removed from office. And from what you're saying, even more than that, he needs to go to jail.
He just, Jacqueline Sweet, the reporter who actually took my whole story down, and she's been breaking a lot of stuff about this guy. She lives right up there in Long Island too. So, you know, she's an expert that I guess a reluctant expert on him now. She just broke another story the other day about him stealing $15,000 worth of puppies from Amish breeders and then having a puppy adoption event somewhere in Staten Island like the very next day. He's getting $300-400 a piece for these puppies and stuff.
Wow.
So he went out to Amish country, wrote bad checks to these Amish purebred breeders, and then bounced the checks. They never got their money, and then he went and made extra money off these dogs the next day at an adoption event. And I don't think the owner of the pet store got any of the money either. There was something weird about writing a check to him, and instead of writing it out to Friends of Pets United, he wanted it written out to Anthony DeVolder instead. And then he crossed out Friends of Pets United when the guy gave him the check, and he wrote his name in there, and the bank accepted it anyway.
That's crazy. Yeah. And you probably saw, even on the statement he wrote about your story, even his statement, he wrote stuff wrong. Did you see how he said,
everything is a typo? It's not a typo.
Yeah, and you're a congressman. But it was like, and Chris said it on the show, he mentioned like maybe a Freudian slip, where he said, I'm trying to think of what he wrote, because he said, instead of like rescued, he used a different word, or right?
He said something about saved 2,400 dogs and 800 cats or something like that. I don't know if that's the same thing you're talking about.
I'd have to but he used a word that I'd have to look at the tweet again. I'd have to find it. But basically, it was the wrong word to use. And yeah, I don't think he saved any animals. I think everything in this guy's life is a lie. Everything from his mom dying in 9/11 when she wasn't even in the country, to the drag queen stuff,
his family surviving the Holocaust.
Yeah, and it's also, look, I mean, I know this is different than the other things we're talking about, but it's definitely sketchy, the fact that he was married to a woman, then he comes out as gay.
Needed a green card so he didn't have to go back to Brazil and face the music there for the stolen checks.
You think that's what it is?
Probably.
Yeah.
And that makes me even wonder,
is he a gay man? Is he not? I mean, I don't know. Everything is a lie, so it's very hard to know.
He was putting on that voice, if it even is put on, that whole affected voice that he has. Back in 2006, when I spoke to him on the phone, the whole spiel he gave me on the phone about,
was he married to a woman, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I only spoke to him the 3 times. He gave me this whole spiel at one time on the phone, when the first, like, hi, how you doing, get to know you sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And it was, I helped rescue all these dogs and cats and horses, and he rolls his eyes to emphasize stuff. And then he says, and I even had 8 baby jumping goats. And he looks away like you can tell he's lying. He's like looking to that one side of his brain where he's full of shit.
Yeah.
And he says, I rescued 8 baby jumping goats in my car. And that was on, when I was on CNN the first time with Erin Burnett. They played something right before she started questioning me, and he was saying that exact same thing on a pre-recorded interview, the exact same spiel he gave me over the phone. It was rehearsed. He had a script. He was going on his whole con man script. Just extra nice, extra, I want to call it flirtatious almost.
Yeah.
Just to suck me in and get me to believe him, his whole story.
I wonder if he's starting to feel the heat, man, because and maybe he gets off on it, as you said, but it's like everywhere he goes now, it's microphones in his face. I heard that he locked himself inside the office. That's in Queens.
Swazi's office.
Yeah, it still says Swazi. I've driven by there. My friend actually lives right on that same road.
In Douglaston?
Yeah, in Douglaston. His apartment's in Douglaston. So yeah, it still says Swazi on the building, but I think he might be starting to feel the pressure, because there's no way that this guy doesn't walk down the street now and get yelled at by everyone. People are pissed.
Saw him a couple of weeks ago getting off. I think it was in LaGuardia or JFK.
Did you see him, or are you saying you saw it?
No, it was this was on the news.
Yeah, I saw that.
And you had some just random Joe screaming at him, "Con artist!"
Yeah.
He's got to be getting.
He's
that
probably
everywhere.
getting that. Yeah, exactly. He's probably getting that everywhere. But maybe he likes it. Maybe he likes being a villain.
Attention is attention.
Yeah.
Just to a narcissist, it doesn't matter if it's bad or good attention. I think.
Yeah. So what's important to you is like just getting this, because I was very happy that when I originally called your father, because he was the Richard Osthoff that I found and then got me in touch with you, that you were like, yeah, let's do this. Let's go in studio. Like, what's important? You getting the word out as much as possible that people know this, because I think probably when it was just the first few lies piling up, there were a lot of people who felt like, who really cares? Everyone in Congress lies. I'm not surprised. But as things get more and more over the top, we realize, like, no, this isn't like a lie that politicians tell where there's something based in reality and they blow it up. Like, this is a guy whose entire life is built off a resume that is entirely false and who screwed people over in the process. And I'm sure we're going to hear other people come out like you, who maybe in time might live in other states, who he's not on their radar, and then they might be putting the pieces together. Maybe someone will hear this interview and go, I remember working with Anthony DeVolder, who lost all this money for me. So, yeah, what's your purpose of this?
Pretty much, I'm doing this for my baby Sapphire. She didn't die in vain. This guy's got to go, and if her story helps get him out of where he doesn't belong, she's in heaven right now looking down, and she's got her tail wagging, I think. And if I didn't come forward with this, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I wouldn't be able to live with myself, because if I didn't bring this to the forefront and people didn't know that he does stuff like this, he might just continue doing it.
Yeah.
Like I said before, he's a danger to our country. He's writing laws and stuff now. Like I said, I'm not wearing a uniform anymore, but I can still defend this country.
Yeah.
I've got a voice, and I'm not going to be silent about this. I really don't like doing all this stuff. I don't like the attention. I'm a very introverted guy. I haven't had a girlfriend in 14 years. Rarely have people at my house. It's just me and the dogs. Very solitary. So being out here in the spotlight, doing all these interviews and stuff, having cameras in my face all the time, it makes me swoon sometimes. It just like dizzies me. And I mean, this is a very calm interview.
Yeah, that's why I was even telling you. This is as casual as it gets.
I didn't sleep last night, even though I knew it was going to be.
Which is funny to me, because, people, and I've heard that before, and it's so funny because I've interviewed so many guys who, they're open about it, have either killed in combat or been shot in combat, and it's like they're nervous to do an interview. And I don't know. For me, this is, I think, because I've done it for so long, but also I would feel the same way as you if it's like the type of thing where you're talking about possibly going on Chris Cuomo, which I know that fell through, but just as an example, and you have someone in your ear going like, we got to be out in 10 seconds. And I like doing this long form stuff because I learned so much about you, and just reading the article, I don't know why you were homeless at that time. And I don't know what took you so long to come forward.
A lot of people think that a homeless person is homeless because they're alcoholic, drunk, or a drug addict or something like that. And they don't realize that people can be hard workers, break a leg, break an arm, dislocate something, and they're out of work and they get evicted. It happens. It could happen to anybody.
And the amount of veteran homelessness too. I feel like there's veterans who really like transition and they thrive, and some of them build multi-million-dollar companies. And then there's a lot of veterans who have a lot of trouble transitioning. We've had veterans on the podcast before who were like brilliant writers who have gone on to write New York Times bestsellers, and they say when they got out of the military, like they couldn't even drive like delivery for Domino's because people look at their resume and they go, you're overqualified, but they can't find anything. So
I either got that, or I couldn't deal with the people I was working with, being military and having to follow a set of rules a certain way for a number of years. And then you work with some civilians, especially some like 16, 18-year-old kids who just don't care. I used to get pissed. I'd throw stuff around, and part of the PTSD and stuff too. I just storm out of a job and quit just because everybody else sucks.
And then also some of those kids just don't know how to speak to veterans, in that I've had so many guys come on before. Adults. Yeah, but veterans in particular, I've had a lot of guys come on before and sometimes it's adults who will, hey, how many people did you kill? And that is not, whether you're a veteran served in combat or not, like that is not the first thing they want to hear. So,
yeah, that's not something cool to talk about. I know guys that have been in combat that have taken that, and they don't want to talk about it either.
And if they do, maybe it's a setting like this. Maybe it's a setting of just other veterans. But yeah, in like a regular job setting, that's not what they want to be known for.
Now somebody coming up, hey man, I heard you were in the Marines. How many guys did you kill? Did you ever tear anybody's ears off and wear them around your neck? Yeah, they don't want to answer questions like that.
Yeah.
That's makes you feel like a heel, you know.
No, it's true, and I think like people forget all the great things that guys do in combat, all the lives that they have saved, and also just all the stories I've heard of guys who have served in combat, unlike you, but like they embed themselves in the culture. They do get to know children, and unfortunately, the stuff that goes viral is like the veteran misbehaving and doing something completely terrible. And that's how it all gets painted. And there's a lot to do with the polarization of everything. It's the same with like the story of a police officer who's helping people in the community. That's not going to go viral. It's the guy who's abusing his power. That's what goes viral. So
the stuff that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, even like the congressman who's doing the right thing and passing great law, like George Santos is going to get the attention because it's like inflammatory and it's bizarre and wild. So, yeah.
It's a circus act.
Yeah, but in this case, it's important people hear it because something does need to be done, and it's really unprecedented. I don't think there's ever been anyone in the history of this country who rose to these ranks off a completely fraudulent resume. So,
and you know, I've had a few people tell me that you know, if he's going to do this to a veteran and a service animal, what else is he going to do? He's going to go set fire to an orphanage so he can erect an oil rig or something there. He's just he's like Boss Hogg from the Dukes of Hazzard or something. He's a supervillain. Yeah. Not so supervillain, I should say.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I do hope we see the day that you get to confront this guy in person, you know, not physically or anything like that.
I hope that I get to sit on a witness stand, and I'm pretty sure that day is going to come. He tore my heart out by taking my best friend away from me. She would have died eventually anyway, but if I would have had 2 or 3 more years with her, that would have given me time to get another dog before she passed away so suddenly and everything. What he did to me was, God, took that money that I thought I had, and it was like he just kept kicking me in the balls, even though I wasn't talking to him or seeing him or having any type of you know, every single day that I looked at my dog, looked at my little Sapphire, and I knew there was nothing I could do to get her out of her pain and the uncomfortable situation that she was in. I felt like I failed her, and it was just a kick in the balls every single time I came home from work and I saw her again, losing more and more of her mobility and stuff. I don't usually like to get people in trouble. I'm not a cop caller or anything like that. I know somebody calls the cops on me, I hate them for the rest of my life. But what he did to me is deserving of my speaking up and getting law enforcement involved and everything. If he's going to do this to me, he's going to do it to anybody else. He has no remorse. He doesn't have any humanity. And if I'm the reason or part of the reason that he's let out of Congress in a pair of silver bracelets, I'm going to be a proud SOB.
Yeah, you should be. Yeah.